All right, today we're diving into a fascinating economic mystery. Seriously, it's a story that has it all. A national treasure, a sudden crisis, and a really unexpected culprit. And it all revolves around one of the world's most popular fruits, the pineapple, coming straight from the fields of Ghana.
So I want you to just imagine this for a second. You build your entire business, your whole livelihood, on one amazing product. And then practically overnight, your biggest customers just turn around and say, nope, sorry, we don't want that anymore. It is an absolute nightmare scenario for any business, and it is exactly what happened to thousands of pineapple farmers in Ghana.
But before the disaster, there was a golden age. And to really understand the collapse, you first have to appreciate just how big of a deal the Ghanaian pineapple industry really was.
For decades, Ghana was a true pineapple powerhouse. I mean, the whole sector was this massive success story. It was creating jobs, it was boosting incomes, and it was bringing in all this crucial foreign money. For a long, long time, if you were in Europe and you were eating a pineapple, there was a very, very good chance it came from Ghana.
And then, bam, the music just stopped. In 2005, the industry got hit by a market shock that was so fast and so severe, it nearly wiped out the entire sector.
So here's what happened. On one side, you have the old guard. These are the smooth cayenne and sugarloaf pineapples that Ghana had spent years perfecting. But on the other side, you've got the new contender, a variety called MD2. This thing was like the supermodel of pineapples. It was sweeter, it had this perfect golden color, and it lasted way longer on the shelf. It was a dream for European supermarkets. And the market didn't just shift, it slammed the door shut on the old varieties.
And the speed of this collapse was just staggering. Look at this timeline. In 2004, Ghana's on top of the world, right? They've got a 10.5% market share in Europe. By 2005, that MD2 shockwave hits. And just 2 years later, by 2007, their export volumes had tanked by over 40%, and their market share just cratered to 4%. An entire industry brought to its knees in what felt like the blink of an eye.
So the problem seems clear, right? And the solution, well, it seems kind of obvious, doesn't it? If the market wants MD2 pineapples, you just start growing MD2 pineapples. But as the researchers looking into this found out, it was nowhere near that simple.
Okay, so the crisis hits in 2005. The research we're looking at here, they collected their data in 2012. That's 7 full years for farmers to adapt and make the switch. So, let me ask you, what percentage of farmers do you think had actually adopted this new, in-demand MD2 variety by then?
Just 18%. I mean, that's just wild. After 7 years, a whopping 82% of farmers were still not growing the MD2. The so-called obvious solution had totally failed. So the mystery just got deeper. Why on earth weren't they making the switch?
And when you dig into the data, the story gets even more dramatic. While about 31% of conventional farmers had made the switch, for organic farmers, look at that, it was less than 2%. So why? Well, it turns out the MD2 variety was kind of a diva. It wasn't well adapted to Ghana's environment, it got sick more easily, and it often needed chemical treatments that were a total non-starter for certified organic farmers.
And this is so important. This wasn't about farmers being stubborn, not at all. That 2005 crisis had literally bankrupted many of them. They had no cash, and they couldn't get loans they needed to cover the super high costs of switching to a new, riskier crop. They were completely trapped, forced to stick with the old pineapples that nobody wanted anymore.
But here is where the story takes a fascinating turn. The researchers started asking a totally different question. They thought, okay, maybe the problem isn't just the type of pineapple, maybe the issue is something much, much more fundamental.
You hear this kind of thinking a lot in development economics, right? Is the problem that the farmers themselves are just inefficient? Are they failing to get the most out of the land and the resources they already have? It's a fair question to ask, but the answer they found was truly stunning.
97%. That was the average technical efficiency score for these farmers. Just let that number sink in for a moment. But what in the world does that actually mean?
Well, technical efficiency is basically a measure of how good you are with what you've got. Think of it like this. It's like getting the absolute most horsepower you possibly can out of your car's engine. A score of 97% is, well, it's almost perfect. These farmers were not inefficient. In fact, they were masters of their craft, squeezing nearly every single drop of potential out of the technology they had.
So if the farmers are masters of their tools, maybe the tools themselves are the problem. This is where our next key number comes in, 95%. This is something called the meta-technological ratio.
The MTR measures the technology gap. So let's go back to our car analogy.
This tells us that the farmers' engines are tuned perfectly, but the real problem is that their competitors are showing up to the race in brand new electric cars. The gap between their technology and the best available tech in the world was tiny. They were already performing at the absolute peak of what their system allowed.
And this finding makes it crystal clear. The problem was not the farmers. They weren't lazy, they weren't inefficient, not by a long shot. The problem was systemic. It was the production environment itself, the tools, the infrastructure, the whole shebang, that was holding the entire industry back.
So if the farmers aren't the problem, what is? Well, this final section zeroes in on the real culprits behind that technology gap, and it actually maps out a path for a much stronger future.
The research identified the key factors at play, and it's pretty clear. On one side, you have the things that shrink the tech gap and boost production. Good roads, electricity, access to markets, foundational stuff. And on the other side, you've got the blockers, these environmental issues like soil erosion and seasonal floods. It's a constant battle between progress and decay.
The researchers put it perfectly in their conclusion. I'm just going to read this directly because it really hits the nail on the head. The continuous use of current production techniques does not give much scope for large output expansion. In other words, you can't just keep asking these hyper-efficient farmers to become even more efficient. You've hit a wall. Without some kind of technological progress, the industry simply can't grow.
So this research builds into a real actionable plan. The study lays out a clear recipe for revival, and it's not about blaming the victims, it's about changing the system. Step 1, transfer modern technology to them. Step 2, invest in infrastructure like roads and electricity. And Step 3, and this one is huge, create flexible credit systems so farmers can actually afford to innovate and bounce back from shocks.
The story of Ghana's pineapple farmers leaves us with this powerful, universal question. To grow an industry, or even an entire economy, what do you focus on? Squeezing more out of your already efficient workers, or giving them better tools to fundamentally change the entire game? The answer, it seems, is buried deep in the soil of West Africa.